Oh, what's going on YouTube? Welcome back to my channel. My name is John, and for today's video, we're learning how to draw comics the Marvel way. This is a little awkward. Give me 1 second. Alright guys, I'm back after a quick little wardrobe change. Makes more sense for the video. So like I mentioned, today we're learning how to draw comics the Marvel way. This book is the best and most iconic book to learn how to draw comics, especially for beginners. This book breaks down everything you need to know to get started. You can't get better than this. Every artist in the industry that are still in the industry, retired, either had this book, still has this book, references this book, learned by starting here. You can watch multiple videos of artists that ask about what books they learned from growing up, and this was the #1 answer 90% of the time. I'm going to be breaking down the chapters in this book, what you need to know right now to get started, especially as a beginner, and we're going to make this into a lesson video, parts video. We're going to start with part 1 today. Maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, go to a part 2 as we develop our skills, because this channel is all about learning, growing, and developing every single day. So let's get started. How to draw comics the Marvel way with the chapter breakdowns. These are going to be very brief, but I'm going to go ahead and do like a 1-sentence description of each chapter, and at the end of this I will letting you guys know which chapters we will be covering today for your first lesson of how to draw comics the Marvel way, the best beginning art book for any comic artist. Okay, so look at chapter 1, the tools and the talk of the trade. This chapter is all about showing you the tools that you will be using as a comic artist. Very, very simple. It basically has it in the title what it's going to be doing. It breaks down the terminology you use for like the text bubbles, the splash pages, for example. It points out all of that information, so it's really, really cool to have in a chapter. To chapter number 2, this is the secrets of making an object look real. So this is more of an advanced chapter, I would say, because drawing objects, especially for me at least, is harder than drawing people. So once we get a full understanding of the person, then this will be awesome to break down objects like cars, planes, if they have any weapons that they use for their abilities, stuff like that. Chapter number 3 is the power of perspective, and perspective is very, very, very important. It's the necessary step to make a scene look accurate, as here it says in the book. It makes things appear correctly, placed in the foreground, background, and all the places in between. The biggest difference between a pro artist and someone that's still trying to get in the industry is that everything looks like it's one image. There is no separation. So that perspective of getting the foreground, background, the midground laid out is super important. That's what you'll learn in chapter number 3. For chapter number 4, it is the studying of the figure. That is where they break down the sizes of the characters. You'll be seeing how big, how wide characters need to be for certain ratios of that person. It breaks down the male figure, the female figure, costumes, all that good stuff. And then when you get to chapter 5, it ties in really well with it. Chapter 4 is very, very brief in that it doesn't really show much details of drawings, but really breaks down in writing the shapes of the individual people. For chapter 5, you will be drawing the figures. This will teach you gesture drawings, how to get figures on a page very fast and loose. These are very important, especially when starting out as a comic artist, and ultimately is the most important step to get a very dynamic figure. Chapter number 6 is the name of the game is action. This
chapter will take your characters to the next level. It gives it the animation of looking like they're throwing a punch, of if they are kicking somebody, if they're flying. It gives you the dynamic look to make them look like superheroes. So once we get the figure drawn out and not the objects but the shapes figured out, then it is time to take them to the next step and get them in their action state. Chapter number 7 is another advanced chapter. That is where you'll be learning the foreshortening of characters. Foreshortening is very, very tricky and can make and break a comic. It is vitally important because it helps make people and objects and scenes more realistic, because there's foreshortening in everything. It happens in perspective, it happens for characters. Everything you draw will have foreshortening in it, because not everything is a straight on angle. Once we have the characters drawn out, we have the action done, we have the anatomy on the page, then it's time to start practicing the foreshortening of the human and put them in different dynamic poses. Chapter number 8 is drawing the human head, which I believe is probably the second most important thing to drawing a figure, because for me, the faces tell the expression. The body is absolutely amazing. You put as much detail in there as possible, but if the eyes aren't right, if you can't display what the character is feeling through their face, then you lose the audience. So drawing the head and getting the proportions right is so important, and that's what you will be learning in chapter number 8. Chapter number 9 is all about composition. Composition is super important when creating comics. It ultimately puts the picture together. You can call it the layout, you can call it composition, you call it design. What it says here in the book is that it all adds up to one vitally important point. You got one to put your picture together so that it is pleasing to the eye and gets the message across clearly. The composition needs to be dynamic. It needs to capture the audience's eyes. It needs to flow from panel to panel, so that way the story doesn't stop. Chapter number 10 is draw your own comic page. This is when you get to the point of the chapter to where you get to put everything you've learned into getting a finished result and a page that you would be comfortable turning in for submissions, to turn in to get a job at Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, Boom, so be it. This starts from everything. This starts from the gesture drawings to the compositions to the thumbnails. This breaks down everything that you will need to know to draw your own page. So this is a very advanced step and will take us multiple weeks to get there, but once we do, the result will be awesome. Chapter number 11 is the comic book cover. The comic book cover is just like the thumbnail for a YouTube video. The thumbnail or the cover has to be eye-catching. It has to catch the reader's attention before they even open it. For example, in this book, it has Nova versus Spider-Man. That says the man called Nova face to face with Spider-Man, and it's an awesome cover of Nova and Spider-Man fighting. So that in alone is you get two Marvel icons going at it face to face on the cover. Obviously, that's going to get readers' attention. This teaches you the breakdown of what captures the audience's eyes, different angles, different shots you need to do, and the process of which you need to make a cover, and especially to make room for the titles. So it breaks down the spacing that you need. So this is another advanced step that we'll get to later in the weeks, but it is awesome once you get to put it together. Chapter number 12 is the art of inking. I know I need this help. My inking is very awful. I am just a penciler when I do my submissions to try to get work. So when I am looking for books for inking, I take all the advice I can get, and I'm super excited to get to this chapter. They'll teach you inking techniques, mostly with a brush pen, because back during this book was made, most of all inking was done with a brush pen, but now we have aged to where people use a brush pen as well still, but a lot of people use micron pens, Tombow pens, stuff like that. So there's a lot of markers involved as well as now. So it still teaches you a lot of the dark shadows into the rendering, over inking to where everything looks like one big blob. So it breaks down everything that you need to know to make your inking successful, get the point across, and to make it look super, super clean for print. So now that we have our chapter breakdowns from chapter 1 all the way through 12, I will be telling you all which chapter or chapters we are going to start with to help learn the how to draw comics the Marvel way in the best possible order. And that is with chapter number 4 and chapter number 5. It all starts with learning the figure. Learning the figure is ultimately the best starting point, because without the figure you can't draw in perspective. Without a figure you can't add objects to the scene like a chair, a lamp, a ceiling. So it's really important that we capture the figures first. And so that's what we're going to be covering in chapter 4 and chapter 5 today. I left off chapter 6 because we have to get the basics down first. We will get to chapter 6 and adding the anatomy and the action to shots at a later time, probably our part 2. But chapter 4 and chapter 5 is where we're going to be starting our process today. Alright guys, so now that we're here and have some paper in front of us, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be breaking down chapter number 4 and chapter number 5 in How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. As you can see here, I went ahead and did a proportion drawing to cover basically all of chapter 4 because that is really what this lesson is about, is to study the figure and the proportions. There isn't much drawing in chapter 4, just a lot of notes and detail that you want to get from this chapter. What I do want y'all to do though is I want you all to go ahead and subscribe to this channel before we get started. It means the world to me to go ahead and support what I'm doing here. If you love the content, if you love the direction it's headed, that really would mean a lot to me. Also, during this process, I want you all to go ahead and add me on Instagram. I'll put it right here. Tag me during your art journey as you follow these tutorials. Follow me on Instagram. Tag me in the photos. Let me see the work that you are doing so I can follow along and see your art journey as we develop together, okay? Awesome. For chapter 4, there are some key takeaways that we need to talk about in this chapter, and that's really a lot of details in the proportion of the drawings. As you can see here, I already drew out if you have the book in front of you on page number 43, I drew out a very basic figure. In the book, it is Mr. Fantastic, but this is just to show you the proportions of the superhero body or figure, if you will. The figure of a superhero is normally around 8 3/4 heads tall, or 8 1/2 will do. I normally draw mine a little bit bigger, normally around 9. Because it's completely on accident. That's how I learned how to draw. I was captivated by 90s art for this. But here, I dialed it back down so you all can see the proportions. The good thing about this as well is that they will have wider shoulders. They will have a slim waist as well. So it is very important that you don't necessarily follow this to a T, but keep it close. You don't want to draw a superhero figure the same as a citizen. So this is important to do. This takes no time to do. This took me like 15-20 seconds. It's literally just a quick rough outline, and then all I did was go through with the 2B pencil to darken it up so it'd catch up on the camera for you all to see. Okay, so moving on in chapter 4, once you have this established, you can go ahead and copy this down if you don't have the book in front of you. This will give you the proportion sizes of what you need, okay? So moving on in chapter 4, the women figures as well are the same as the male figures. They are also going to be 8 1/2 or 8 3/4 head tall, but they are going to have a less of a muscle tone unless you're drawing certain characters, but majority will have a slimmer physique, not as much muscle detail unless you're drawing something for She-Hulk, for example. The rest of chapter 4, there really isn't much to go over because it's a little too advanced. It starts going over the different body shapes and the figures of brute characters, bigger characters, like metallic texture with Doctor Doom. So what I really wanted to cover today is chapter number 5. Chapter 5 is super, super important. That is where we start to draw the figure and what this whole part 1 chapter is really about. This is all about gesture drawing. Gesture drawing is something you should be doing every single day as a comic artist. It is basically my warm-up every morning just to get figures on the page. It helps you draw from imagination. If you can see it in your head, and these simple shapes can be broken down to where you can draw anything you put your mind to. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so really, basically for this entire lesson is you're going to be looking at this book. If you want to get a copy of the book, it's in the description down below. It is a link to Amazon. This book is always available. It's always in stock, so make sure you grab a copy, or you can just draw along from what you see here on the screen, okay? Alright, so we're going to be drawing this figure here laying down. These are broken down by John Buscema. It is his gesture drawings. So some of these are going to be a little bit difficult. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be just drawing these as fast as possible. This is meant to be loose, capture a bunch of energy, and go from there. What we're going to be doing here is, like mentioned, is we're going to be drawing for pure energy. Keep these loose, keep them fast, and try to capture that raw emotion of the art. So a lot of these gesture drawings are going to start with the head, and then from there, something that we like to call the action line, which is the center mass of the character that gives its dynamic shape, or gives it its figure for this drawing. So for example, as you see on the drawing, you have the head, and then that line that's running through the center chest to the pelvis is the action line for this for this character that's being drawn laying down. When you look at these gesture drawings, the forms can be broken down into very simple shapes. A lot of circles and a lot of long lines currently for this part of gesture drawing. This is the simplest form for the underlying drawing. This is basically the skeleton before we add on the muscle tone, or the second stage of gesture drawings, which adds the cylinders and the squares. So for a lot of these parts, like the head, the chest, the pelvis, and the joints and the hands and feet, you'll be using circles. For the limbs, you'll be just using lines. This is just meant to capture the emotion and the essence of the character in a simplified state, just to see if you're happy with how the character looks before adding all of the detail. So looking here, what I'm doing is I'm just going back over with the 2B pencil to make sure that everything looks proportionate for the camera. And as you can see, like mentioned, we have the joints with the circles, the heads, the body, the pelvis. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to draw a couple more of these, but I'm going to be speeding them up just so you can see the process, since it's that easy to be broken down. For this one, as you can see, this is a character running, so you have the center mass, or the line, action line, running from the head down to the pelvis at just kind of a slight arching. You have the legs going back, one going back, one going forward, one arm forward, one arm backwards. All of these are from the book, so if you have the book, feel free to follow along with me. If you don't, feel free to pause it, catch up, or pull up references for yourself. These books, this is on, if you're having trouble finding it, it's on page 53, where you can find the drawings for these. On that third one, this is a character that is in the act of blocking, throwing a punch. So you have the arm going back in motion, and you have the right arm swinging across as if he was punching it with a wide stance. So you can see that action line is at a much curved state because it has the most motion. For this bottom one, this is going to be our example for a cylinder, more of a rendered gesture drawing once you get your underlying drawing finished. So what I'm doing now is I'm erasing down the underlying drawing of the gesture to start adding in those shapes for the character, which in the book is Iron Man. So I'm just going over with my lead holder just to get the general shapes. This is the cool part to where you can see certain elements of the costume start to come into play, but that is very, very basic when doing so, because you don't want to add too much of the elements just to erase it if you don't like it. So for these gesture drawings, when I start to render them out, I normally start with the head because it's the most important state. It sets the proportions for the rest of the body. The last thing I want to do is create a character with a super big chest, super big arms, super big legs, and then I get to the head and I'm made it super, super small, and it is a standard superhero with like a brute head. So you got to be super, super careful about that. So here, looking at the chest and the arms, you see the chest starting to get rendered out with just a simple rectangle, and then the arm is a simple cylinder. And then for the joints, you'll see balls, circles getting featured as well, just like that, to add just the process of connecting the forearm to the upper arm, where the bicep and everything is. So you see the hands start to come into play. This is still helping with proportions. I still recommend drawing the hands out. That is a big difference, is if you get used to just drawing the hands as circles or the feet as circles, then you get complacent with them. You'll try to hide them. Always work on the hands and feet. They help draw emotion. They help tell the story. So they're super, super, super important when creating a character. Here, we're starting to work on the legs. The legs are a little bit more complicated, especially for this character that is in a pose, so it's not your standard cylinder shape, just because the leg is coming, the calf muscle is coming under the thigh there. So you'll have your simple cylinder shape that turns into another cylinder that connects, and then connects to the boot into the foot down there, as you can see. So this is, like I mentioned, is where you get to see everything start coming together as we start working on the second leg here, which is the leg that's going to be extended out. So you see me creating a ball shape right there, which is just the connecting point for the hip, just so I can see where the hip aligns to the torso, so I know where the leg needs to be coming out from. So these are super, super easy, like mentioned. There's our first cylinder shape for the thigh. We have a square going in for the knee, and then we'll be adding in the lower half of the leg where the calf meets the ankle here in just a second. And it's very important right now that we don't add any anatomy in the drawing right now, because anatomy is a complete separate step. Once we get past gesture drawings and matching or getting to a point that we feel comfortable with our figures, then we can go in and add the anatomy. We don't want to move in too quickly, so it's super, 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 super important that we take our time with this process and get the proportions mastered. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be going over with the 2B pencil, like mentioned, just to get a picked up on the camera, obviously, but to get a cleaner line, just so you all can see it better and see the shapes. So like mentioned, there's the chest, with just a simple rectangle, the rib cage, the cylinder for the upper arm. There's the joint for the circle, and then you'll get the connecting lines here where the joint goes into the forearm for another rectangle or cylinder shape. Here I'm drawing out the hands. They're going to be super, super rough, because they're not, like I mentioned, not wanting to be super detailed, but it is important to start working on those proportions, because you can make the hands too big, too small, and it throws off the proportions of the body. So it's still important to work on those things, so that way when you are done, you're not behind because you aren't practicing these parts of the body. So now we're working on the torso, connecting it to the leg. There's the pelvis line. I had trouble seeing it, so I had to go back over it. So now we're adding in the leg. So we're adding in, this is when we start to get rid of the cylinder shapes once we start rendering out the line. So as you see, as a finished thigh into calf muscle. So we really fast went from these simple shapes with just lines and circles into a finished gesture piece. And that's what this is all about. You go in step by step, get to the point where you feel comfortable, and then you start getting these final figures without details to where then you can erase down again and start adding in the details for the characters. This is a great way to tell exactly how everything connects. So if you want to freeze it here, please do so. Copy this down. Feel free to draw along with me. But like mentioned, the book's in the description.
Alright guys, so there's part one of how to draw comics the Marvel way. Like I said, this is going to be a multiple part series that I'll be uploading to my channel. So I would love it if you guys would follow along and learn and grow with me as we try to reach our dreams of becoming a professional comic artist. With that being said, I'm going to leave you guys not so much with homework because I'm not a professional, I'm not a teacher, but if you want to follow along, I'm going to give you the process that I'll be doing for the next couple of weeks to help me develop and grow myself. Like we covered in today with these gesture drawings, I'm going to be drawing an hour of gesture drawings per day. I already do that. It's my warm-up before I start drawing. It helps me get my dynamic poses. It's the start of all of my drawings. But the main thing I want to focus on is I want you all to pick a reference from a comic book, from your favorite art drawing of a dynamic pose that you love of your favorite artist or something. For example, I have Batman Hush here, and my goal is to gesture out this Superman by the end of it all and get to the final stages of a gesture, just like this Iron Man down here on the bottom that we did from the book. Okay. So, like I mentioned before, I would love it if you guys would follow me on Instagram right here. Tag me in your process. Show me what you're working on. I would love to see updates as we learn and grow together. See me put these skills to the test. Watch my very first video on this channel. I drew Gambit as Santa Claus. That's right, your favorite mutant character was delivering packages this holiday season. But check that video out. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe on this one. Do me a favor. It helps me grow, helps me develop this channel and reach more people to learn about comic art and how to develop their skills. All right, thank you very much. Happy New Year, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.